Dear students, this is your lecturer for the first additional language teaching in the foundation phase module. The module name is FLT3701, and my name is Miss Margaret Ramokgopa. Here's my contact number 012-429-6277, and my email, there it is, ramomm@unisa.ac.za. All these details, you'll find them on your TAT letter and study guide. What is this module all about? This is a teaching and learning first additional language module. In this module, this is what you are getting. You will be getting tutorial letter, and it has the contact numbers. And you'll also get a TAT letter 201 after you have done your assignment 2. And you also have a study guide. There's no prescribed book for this module. And this is the outline of the module. Unit 1, policy guidelines for the teaching and learning of first additional language. In Unit 2, you will learn about understanding and facilitation of language skills in the foundation phase classroom. Unit 3, understanding and interpreting second language policies for facilitation in the foundation phase classroom. Unit 4, you'll learn about understanding and applying language theories to teaching and learning and its implication to the teaching of a language. Unit 5, teaching language skills using different strategies and methodologies. Unit 6, designing and implementing appropriate assessment tools for assessing the level of language development of learners. This module is linked to your teaching practice module, namely TPF3704. You will see that I've written FLT3701, which is your module, and TPF3704, it is your teaching practice module. Some of the activities in the TPF3704, which is a language teaching practice module, you'll find some examples. It links to this module. And there are assessment rubrics in the module of your teaching practice. It's always important, before you do your teaching practice, familiarize yourself with the teaching practice assessment and marking rubric. And during your teaching practice, evaluate your own work against the criteria as it progresses. After complete self-evaluation reflection by self-assessing your work. Remember, you are teachers. Teaching practice is very key. Okay, and these are the outcomes of the modules. Outcomes of module 1, policy guidelines for teaching and learning FAL in the South Africa is analyzed. Outcome 2, in-depth understanding of facilitation language in the foundation phase classroom. Outcome 3, understanding and interpretation of the second language policy and the facilitation thereof in the classroom. Outcome 4, understanding and apply the language theories on language teaching and learning in their implications. Outcome 5, teach language skills by using different strategies and methodologies. Outcome 6, design and implement appropriate assessment tools for assessing the level of language development of learners. You will see that these outcomes are linked to each and every unit. It means after completing each and every unit, you'll be able to do this. There is an assessment plan. Assessment 1 you have already submitted, which was due on the 8th of May 2020. Assessment 2 is due on the 10th of July 2020. You also upload it on my UNISA. Examination data can't give it now. We'll wait for UNISA because of the situation we find ourselves in. So that will be communicated to you through my UNISA. Please check my UNISA at all times. And if possible, I get that, I will also upload it to announcement on my UNISA. Okay, let's talk about you as a teacher. What is our task as teachers? Our main task is to help learners to learn, to understand, to speak and write English. Have understanding of principles which should underline the choice of language items included, sequence and arrangement. Children's environment and context is very important as you teach language. Concepts introduced should be suitable for the stages of development of the children. And learning should be interesting. This is what you are supposed to do and know as a teacher. Remember, English needs vary from school to school and class to class. Remember, this is South Africa. I'm talking about South African situation here, where English vary from school to school and class to class. And English needs they vary. So you need to understand that and make note of that they are not the same. But what is a language? What can you do without a language? Language is a media of communication. Through it, we convey our thoughts. We listen to others so that we may receive their thoughts and feelings. When we speak, others listen and receive our thoughts. When people put their thoughts on paper using marks, which are recognized as written symbols, we read and receive messages. This is very key to you students, that our learners need to be able to communicate in that language that you are teaching them, which is their first additional language. Some call it FAL, some call it second language, but you will see why we call it FAL in South Africa. Unit 1. Policy guidelines for the teaching and learning of first additional language in South Africa. That's the Unit 1 heading. Outcomes of Unit 1. After studying this unit, students will be able to follow policy guidelines for teaching a FAL, but this time we're looking at the policy guidelines in South Africa. I know some of you are not in South Africa, in other countries. Read the policy guidelines and understand them, but also understand the policy guidelines this side, because I might ask you questions about our policy guidelines. Embed the teaching and learning of FAL in lesson preparations, embedded. Implement teaching and learning of FAL in the foundation phase. You'll be able to do that after that Unit 1. You'll be able to address the different contexts of FAL teaching and learning and strategies in lesson preparation and teaching. You'll be able to facilitate teaching and learning of FAL as a precursor for the medium of instruction in higher classes. You will be able to, this FAL is a precursor. And what do we mean by that? We mean that in South Africa, you will see as we go through, in South Africa, FAL, teaching English, it's a precursor because English is a language of teaching and learning from intermediate phase, from grade 4. So it's very important that we as foundation phase teachers, we teach and we develop our learners appropriately. You'll be able to develop and apply vocabulary for FAL teaching. You'll see that I interchange. FAL is first additional language. FAL is English first additional language. Some schools will be using a different FAL, which is not English, if their first additional language is English. But in most cases in South Africa, FAL is our second additional language. These are the guiding principles of Unit 1. We said you're going to look at the guiding principles of Unit 1. I'm going to be a bit faster with you. Guiding principles, language acquisition is key. I might ask you a question and say, why is language acquisition key? But it is very key, thus, as teachers, we need to keep certain guidelines in mind. Question 1. Why is it important for teachers to introduce language gradually and make learning as fun as possible? Because language acquisition is key, you need to introduce this language gradually. Because FAL is not necessarily the learner's home language. For instance, in grade R1, the learner might be learning that language for the first time. They never heard of language before, maybe. Maybe they don't understand the spoken written of that language. Remember, you were in that head. Language acquisition is key. Now, what are the implications when you teach this language? Learners may become anxious, show resistance to learning a new language. So it's very important for you as the teacher to remember that language key is Language acquisition is key here. Continue with the guiding principles for teaching FAL. The other principle says, why is it important to take note of this? Many scholars, such as Joubert, Bester, Meyer, Evans, and Pardudi, have highlighted that teachers are to bear in mind the following: that young learners may become intimidated. Language must be gradually introduced in small dosages. Teachers progress to the next lesson as the learners do. Practice patience with the learners. Allow learners time to adjust. Internalize this. Think about it. Who are you as a language teacher? Note, all learners learn in the same pace. Therefore, not all learners learn in the same pace. My apology. Therefore, if the learner is struggling, the teacher must come up with innovative ways. Remember, language acquisition is key. Remember, not all learners learn in the same pace. But at the end of the day, language acquisition is key. Let's go on. Next slide. Still continue with guiding principles. Note, purpose of teaching a FAL is to allow learners to communicate in their language. What types of teaching approaches must a teacher use to teach a FAL? Those approaches, it should be approaches that allow interactive learning and simple process. It is approaches that allow conversational, responsive teaching style, and should be approaches and activities that would allow maximum communication and learner responses during the lesson. Thus, learning activities should be kept more oral, practical, to promote communication. That's very key. Continue with the guiding principles. Note, always take note of what I've written here. The better learners know their home language, the easier it will be for them to acquire knowledge of an additional language. I might ask you a question and say, why is it important? Why is the learner's home language and additive bilingualism influential to the teaching of FAL? It says the better the learners know their home language. You might say it will be easier for the teacher to build on the learner's home language. Why are you saying that? As the learners compare the two languages, they will transfer and apply the home language skills to a FAL. Those language skills they have learned, whatever they have learned, they'll be able to apply those skills to FAL. FAL is influenced by language skills taught in home language. And which language skills are we talking about? Writing, phonic skills, and etc. If they know the sounds and sounds are made, they know how to write, they'll be able to transfer those skills to FAL. Guided reading activities in grade 1 home language are introduced in grade 2. So if you have done guided reading activities, they will be able to participate in guided reading in grade 2. It says, note, FAL literacy skills are influenced by and built on from home language, and this is referred to additive bilingualism. Now, additive bilingualism in South Africa, we mean that it's a second language. They're doing 2 languages, and that is an additive bilingualism. Okay. And we are continuing with Unit 1, still on Unit 1. Let's look at the following in Unit 1. Learners need to hear, repeat, practice lots of simple spoken words in English from the context which they will be able to understand. Now, I might ask you a question. Why is content, context, and progression for each grade key for FAL teaching? Note, teaching lessons in grade R and 1 should concentrate on some of the following. Focus mainly on oral, practical activities. In grade R, build on learner sound patterns to develop FAL. In grade R, learners mainly rely on sound repetition activities to improve their sound sense. They also learn from spoken words. In grade 1, they build vocabulary and word recognition. Words should be taught in context of the theme. Let's say the theme is food, going to school, my home or my family. Grade 2, guided reading activities should start. In grade 3, learners should be able to write simple sentences using grade 3 vocabulary. And B, always note, the context for learning should be grade appropriate, responsive to learning FAL. So you need to also remember that context is key. Appropriateness is key for each and every grade. Let's go on. I have a situation here that I've put here for you. I want you to look at this situation. There are schools. Let me just remove this, it's disturbing me. Yes, I've given you a situations of different schools. School A, both the teacher and the children speak the same African languages. However, the same language is the medium of teaching and learning at the foundation phase, and English replaces it as intermediate phase. These are the situations we find in South Africa. In school B, you'll find that all the children and the teacher speak the same language. However, English is the medium of instruction from the onset. And children have to learn to read it when they still speak very little of the language. Reading, writing is taught in about 8 lessons a week. Let's look at school C. The children come from several communities, each with their own language. English, the medium of instruction from their onset, meaning from grade R. The children learn first to speak it, then read and write it. Few of them will ever learn to read or write in their mother tongue. Here's another situation. The children come to school from different language groups. One of these is dominant and used as a medium in the foundation phase. This is the language that the children first learn to read. For some, it is their first language, but for others, it is a second language. English is either a second language or a third language experienced by the children. Now, these are the scenarios. These are some of the situations when you finish your teaching, you go to schools, you will find in schools. So it's very important to remember that these situations, you'll find them in South Africa. Now, after reading these teaching situations, I'm expecting you to start discussing this amongst yourselves, or you discuss it. I'm not going to discuss it with you, but you can start thinking about it and saying, which of the 4 kinds of schools resembles the majority of the foundation-based schools in South Africa? Let's look at them. How will each situation affect preparation? You would need to be a teacher of FAL. You're teaching them English as a second language or as a first additional language. How will each situation affect the aims and objectives of teaching FAL? Try to answer these questions. Is it important to teach FAL in our schools? State why you say yes or not. So when we give you exams, we give you assignments, sometimes we give you case studies and scenarios. So with this one, try to learn how to answer scenarios and case studies. Continuation of Unit 1, contextual factors. Okay? Contextual factors that influence the learning of additional language. That's the classroom environment. In this contextual factors, teachers are presented with diverse classrooms. Learners have different home languages. Learners know language of English, knowledge of language English varies. Learners' attitudes are not the same. Learners entering foundation phase become and feel vulnerable and nervous to communicate. Learners are at a stage where they are developing their home language, and when you bring a first additional language, they get confused. Remember all this. As a result, they become confused and afraid to, when introduced to an additional language, especially in grade R1, they become confused. Don't ever say these children don't want to listen. These children are this and that and that. Remember who they are. And according to Patude and Mutila, 2014, they say contextual factors such as listening, motivation, teacher personality, overcorrection of learners, and role of learner language might influence teaching and learning of additional language. Let's see how they unpack this. Contextual factors. They spoke about listening. They say listening is a contextual factor. Okay, let's look at that. Listening is the first skill to be carefully developed. They listen to you as you teach. Learners in grade R are trained to listen carefully to sound, to hear the language. So listening skill is very important to develop. Learners are to listen to and hearing repetitive words spoken in English. Learners are taught through activities that will allow them to be able to distinguish sound patterns. Now, if they can distinguish sound patterns, you say, I'm going there, I'm working towards language acquisition. Gradually, they will decode, process words through rhyme, poems, and songs. And they spoke about motivation. They say motivation is key as a contextual factor. What do we mean by that? If learners are happy and relaxed, they will learn better. If tense and feel stupid, they will find it difficult to learn. I close quote. Lent and Leicester, 2015, page 7. Hence, the teacher should ensure or should use innovative ways to teach and make use of positive reinforcements. That is very important. The other contextual factor, teacher personality is key. Teacher need to and must accommodate, be accommodating, patient, and not be harsh to students. Teacher need to understand learner strengths and weaknesses. Teacher need to plan activities around building learner strength and illuminate their weaknesses. There is another contextual factor, which is overcorrection of learners. My apology. Overcorrection would lead to withdrawal. You always correct and correct and correct and correct and say, you don't do that, you don't do that. Be patient. Have a strategy. And we're going to learn about these strategies. Hence, it is important to allow learners build their confidence to speak the language before correcting errors. Hence, it is important to allow learners to build their confidence. This may allow confident learners to ask questions and be corrected on aspects of language which they know little about. The role of home language, that's another contextual factor. Why is it necessary for teachers to have some knowledge of grammar of the predominant home language? Hey, you are going to a school, most of your learners, they speak an African language. You don't know anything about an African language. It's important to try and understand one of the dominant language. You are an Tswana-speaking teacher. You are going to teach these learners, and most of them, they speak in Venda. You need to have an understanding a little bit of how that language is structured. That is key. It's what you need to do. Why it is necessary for teachers to have some knowledge about the grammar of the predominant home language? Reason being that the role of the learner's home language serves as a scaffold for learning an additional language. Teachers need to explain to the learners how the additional language is similar to or different from the home language. Remember, acquisition. The activity will allow learners to be able to make certain associations and connections between the languages. You need them to apply what they know to what you are teaching them. This kind of understanding can influence and enhance learners' understanding of an additional language. The question might come, or how can home language influence learners' understanding of an additional language? Or a question might come and say, why is it necessary for teachers to have some knowledge about grammar of the predominant language? A question might come and say, what is the role of the learner's home language? So you need to understand this. Okay, we also have this, creating responsive context for learning an additional language. It's another aspect. What are the characteristics of a print-rich classroom? Creating responsive is key here. Context. Now that responsive context will be addressed by a print-rich classroom. What is a print-rich classroom? Give examples of each print-rich classroom and explain how they will influence each idea of a print-rich classroom, how they will influence acquisition of an additional language. If you say print-rich classroom, create a responsive context. What do you have? What ideas did you bring in the classroom? What is it that you have put in the classroom to say this classroom is a print-rich classroom? It is a classroom context set up in such a way that it encourages and motivates learners to participate and allow responsive learning. For example, when you write that, you must also give examples. It is a classroom that encourages incidental reading, memorization, and learning of words such as, let's see the next slide. Let's look at the print-rich classroom. It will have posters. The word must be associated with a picture. Different areas in the classroom labeled in bold. Note content must be grade appropriate. It will have pictures. They must be used for responsive learning. Learners must be able to understand them and associate meaning to it and respond appropriately to them or to it. Creating a phonic or a word chart. Every time a new word is learned, get it pinned on the wall. That will help them with incidental reading or incidental learning. Setting up a library corner useful for stimulation that supports reading at all grades. So have your library corner. In grade R, you might even have puzzles. You might even have cards. You put them there at the corner as part of reading. You might have big books. Okay, print-rich classroom. Let's look at strategies to develop and apply vocabulary for IFA. These are very key. Note, when learners learn an additional language in grade R and 1, should build a strong oral foundation which provides the basis for learning to read and write in grade 2 and 3. In English, the term sound is called phonology. Phonemic awareness is the pattern of sounds. Now, I might ask you a question and say, describe and discuss teaching strategies you would use to develop phonemic awareness for IFA learning for different foundation phase grades. And remember this question. It says describe and discuss. Discuss what teaching strategies. But it's a two-phase question. It wants you to describe. You give a detailed account. It wants you to discuss. Then you examine the important aspects and argue all sides. Before drawing a conclusion one way, outline your arguments, backing them with evidence. Consider the implications. So when you're given a question like this, remember how to answer it. It says describe and it says discuss. Now it says describe. You're going to describe what teaching strategies are. And you discuss different teaching strategies that you have described. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Still, we are there. Describe and discuss teaching strategies you would use to develop phonemic awareness in FAL. Learning of an individual word in isolation is not effective. Underline that one. There are no frame of references. Learners need to learn new words which are connected to words they already know. So you can give them rhymes, you can give them sound patterns, you can give them sing-alongs. Don't teach words in isolation. That's what it says. I'm going to the next slide. For instance, we said vocabulary is key earlier on. Let's say you are developing vocabulary. Strategies used to develop vocabulary. Note, vocabulary words should also be associated with visual images. Oral reinforcement of words is extremely important, and daily repetition is needed. Now remember, if I don't have a vocabulary of the language, will I be able to communicate in that language? I won't be able to. Your learners are going to fail in grade 4 if you don't teach them appropriately. Now, which word card do you think learners are likely to be more successful at reading? State why. I have this one, it's ball. I have this one, is that. Now, you can look at both grade R and grade 1 or grade R and grade 3 and say, I'm thinking. Okay, let's look at the answers. You are developing vocabulary, remember, it's key. Remember, we said don't teach words in isolation also, but also use pictures. Remember those strategies we had. Okay, answer the word, the card on the right. They say the card on the right would be appropriate. Reason being, learners might find it difficult to identify the word ball on the left card. Note, this is not very clear why. It is important to add the grade. For instance, in grade R, they might not be able to. But in grade R, in grade 3, they might be able to. So hence we say grades are very important. But if it's in grade 3, you have a learner who's still struggling, you can't say read the word if he can't read the word. You'll always have pictures to assist you. There are no picture clues on the card. The learner has to rely on decoding skills and word recognition. You haven't as yet taught decoding skills. This is yet not. But if you have already started teaching decoding skills in grade 3, then they will be able to. Whereas the right card with the picture of the ball serves as a frame of reference. Yes, frame of reference. It gives the learner a clue to make association and connect to the picture. This strategy helps the learner to read the word meaningfully. Skills developed is listening, speaking, and reading. And at all times when you argue, when you answer questions like this, think about the grade you're talking about. Think about the activities that the learners need to do in that grade. Think about where you envisage the learners to be at that grade. So I would say, if they are in grade R, it will be difficult on this one. But this one will be much better because there is a frame reference. But still, if they're in grade 3 and the learner doesn't understand the language, you will use this one. So it depends. Hence we say their pace is not the same. Okay, let me just be a bit faster. Teaching decoding skills, there you are. Teaching decoding skills. Decoding means to break down the word b, to be b and al, b plus all, b, all. If learners are not taught decoding skills, they may become highly reliant on picture clues. Remember we said sound patterns, decoding skills. But there are words that are so difficult in English, namely sight words. There are words that you can't decode. We call them sight words. Now you can also put them on the wall as sight words. Hence, a lot of focus and practice time is required to learn the sight words. It's important to learn those sight words. Let's look at this activity. This is a grade 2 activity. It's shared reading activity. The topic is comprehension. Ability to understand and respond to picture text. That's the assessment you're going to picture or text. Skills development or skills developed, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Resources, picture of a boy kicking a ball and a flashcard of the flow. So it means you'll be having a boy kicking a ball. You'll see that in your study guide. And then the flashcards, there they are. The whole class reads together with the teacher, teaching and learning. Shared reading. The whole class read together with the teacher. Teacher introduce the words. Develop vocabulary through repeated drilling, and the learners repeat the same words. You need to understand what shared reading is all about. Teacher give learners simple reading comprehension frame to complete, e.g. they can be given this. These are grade 2s. Who kicked the ball? The boy kicked there. That's the comprehension lesson or comprehension activity. Here's an example. Okay. Vocabulary again, development progression. Note vocabulary development focusing on varying levels. Theme, it's my body. Learning activity, identify and labeling body parts. Skills develop, for example, look at page 32 and 38. It is important to practice self-test questions. Now, these varying levels, it's important. I can have my body from grade 1 to grade 3, but the levels of activities are different. You must remember. Why is learner's home language used as a scaffolding for the first additional language? What is FAL and what is EFAL? This question might also be asked. FAL is first additional language, EFAL is English first additional language. Unit 2. Let me go back to Unit 1. This question is key. Why is learner's home language used as scaffolding to learn a first additional language? It helps you as they do what? They apply their knowledge and skills of a home language into your language. And it will help you to scaffold as they're doing EFAL. What is FAL and what is EFAL? You need to understand that FAL is first additional language. EFAL in South Africa is English first additional language. This module addresses that, but you'll find in some situations, EFAL is not your first language. So your first language is English, Afrikaans is your FAL. But in most cases in South Africa, EFAL is our second language. Understanding and facilitation of language skills in the foundation phase. This is Unit 2. The outcomes are there. Define highlights of language in teaching FAL. You'll be able to design and use activities to facilitate language, which is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. These language skills are key. Understand them. In teaching, identify appropriate reading methods for FAL beginner reader. Select text of varying difficulty to promote comprehension. Reflect upon and adapt language skills in teaching. You'll find this in your study guide. Read them and check yourself if you can, if you're able to do this. Okay, these are the main skills we spoke about. About additive bilingual, teaching EFAL. The following statement from CAPS. Children come to school knowing their home language. They can speak it fluently and already know several thousand words. Learning to read and write in grade 1 builds on foundation phase, foundation of oral language. Therefore, it is easier to learn to read, write in your home language. When children start to learn an additional language in grade 1, they need to build on a strong oral foundation. They need to introduce lots of simple spoken English, which they can understand from the context. It's very important for you to understand this. These are some of the policies, the statements that you find on our CAPS document. You can read more in your CAPS document or the policy that you are reading. But it says it's very key to understand this. Listening to the teacher, read stories from large illustrated books. Big books is a good way of doing this, as it also supports children's emergent literacy development. As children's understanding grows, they need plenty of opportunities to speak the language. Remember, you are developing the skill of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. These you find in the study guide from page 7 to page 9. Understanding and facilitation of language skills in the foundation phase. Note, language skills are divided into 4 main categories: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Note, all language skills are interconnected. That is very important. Often overlap as one depends on the other. Together they work towards language creation and acquisition. Note, teaching language skills using the theory of grammar from bottom up can be a difficult task for you as a teacher. For instance, when learners are passive, they look bored. It is not that they are not interested. It's because they don't understand you. They look bored, they are passive. It's because they don't understand. Could be because they are exposed to a new language that they don't know. They'll be passive. This could be both intimidating and challenging task for the learners. Hence, it is important to remember that you are advised to use simple language when communicating with the learners. You know, we have a problem, especially in South Africa, that our children can't read and write. And if a child can't read and write and goes to grade 4, where the child is learning all these languages, all these subjects in English, and we in foundation phase, we haven't as yet developed them to be able to read, write the language. Then it's difficult for them to get their career path. It's difficult for them to continue. Note about listening, how to develop listening skills. Listening is the first skill learners acquire in the foundation phase as they cannot speak. According to Jubed, Best and Mayer 2008, this suggests that different kinds of listening occur in the classroom. We need to differentiate listening as a natural ability, learned skills. It must be a natural ability, but it must also be a learned skill. Listening is a skill which needs to be taught as an effective communication. They need to communicate. Remember, we said in a language they must communicate, which allow learners to hear for meaning and speak in an effective way, so that learners may convey information accurately and in an easy way to understand. I hear what you are saying. Hearing what someone is saying and understanding what they are saying are two different things. I can hear you, but I don't understand. So they also need to understand. Hence, they say there is simple listening, discriminative listening, interpretative listening, creative and critical listening. Let's look at that. Simple listening, hearing the sound, but not entirely awarding meaning. Discriminative listening, comparing the sounds of different and similarities, but at best. And, for example, vowels and consonants there, you read about that in your book, trigraphs, where 3 letters are combined to make one sound. Interpretative listening, you award meaning and emotion to the words. Learners are required to listen carefully and interpret what is said. Listen for information, allow learners to repeat ideas. Now, when you say, I've developed listening skills, what part of the listening skill have you developed? Can they interpret? When I say they can interpret, what do I mean? They're listening in order to summarize ideas. Can they summarize ideas as I was telling them the story, as I was reading the story? Yes, they were able to interpret the story. Can they award meaning and emotion to words which are said? When I was reading and said the lion came and roared and the child did it, were they able to interpret? There is also creative listening. They react to what is heard emotionally, allow learners to provide feedback in the form of creative responses. You'll see that in page 46. Critical listening, understanding, analyzing, comparing, reacting to ideas that are expressed. They must be able to do that. You'll see them in your book. There is another language skill, which is speaking. Note language usage. Very simple. Must be very simple when communicating with learners. Teachers need to sound out letters, exercising the movement of the jaw, activity of pronunciation. Vowel speech sound. You must know how to articulate the sound. If you don't know, ask somebody to help you. Consonant speech sounds are articulated using complete and partial closure for the vocal tract. Note, learners should also be taught to recognize that a word is up of a sequence. It's made up of a sequence of distinct sounds in order for them to make sense of phonics. The word is made up of a sequence of distinct sounds, whereby they will see that when they're doing decoding skills and syllabication are helpful strategies for them. There is one of the scholars, Paduri 2014, highlights that speaking is the ability to express meaning in words, I close quote, a skill that needs to be practiced. For example, the more the learners listen to a spoken language, the more they develop speech. The more they develop speech, the better they will communicate. Remember, we said they must be able to communicate. Only if the learner knows the words and have an idea of the meaning, then they will be able to communicate. Now look at that. Speaking. Note, speaking begins with the use of the following strategies. Basic single words, usually associated with pictures, then slowly develop to phrases, sentences until learners and hold a simple conversation. It's important. Simple strategies to develop speaking and language learning through role play. It involves performing the part of the character. Simple conversation and dialogues help the learners to develop their confidence to speak. Simple telephonic conversation. These are some of the strategies that you can use to develop speaking. Because at the end of the day, they're listening to you, but they must also be able to speak and communicate. Speaking. Instruction given to learners should be reinforced with actions, gestures, to enhance their language understanding. Remember, some of them, the language is first time. So close the door. They don't understand. You will do with action. I'm closing the door. Close the door. Formal language that is grammatically correct should be taught to learners rather than allowing them to deviate by using mixture of languages. Read the following statement. Paduri 2014 suggests that speaking skills should be developed by following a pattern of speaking for intended audience. Underline that one, where a variety of words are used to express meaning. Explain how this knowledge is important for teaching a language, particularly an additional language, by analyzing the following language below used by the teacher greeting the learners. Here you are. Sipho, you come into the classroom with your grade 3 class and you say, hi guys, I'm Sipho. Remember what Paduri said. Good morning, learners, I'm Mr. Sipho. Remember what she said. How's it, children? It's Sipho here. Now what we're saying is that analyze these greetings. Paduri says, speaking skills should be developed by following a pattern of speaking for intended audience, where a variety of words are used. We also say formal language that is grammatically correct should be taught to learners. So it is very important to use the grammatically correct language. Small group communication opportunities be given to grade 2s and grade 3s. Learners discuss the topic and then present the findings using simple English. You can do that. We're still on reading. Reading means to decode and identify print. I might ask you what reading means. Reading occurs for different purposes. Knowing the purpose will determine the text you will select to read and strategy you will use. In home language, you learn in-depth approaches to reading and methodologies to implement and teach reading skills. For the purpose of FAL, reading, there are different ways on how to introduce reading skills. Again, let's note this one. Research has shown that learners' vocabulary development rely on the amount of reading they do. But remember, we said with meaning, with understanding. Reading. There is incidental reading. When learners read, the teacher must ensure that they read for understanding. That is comprehension. Incidental reading, we have different kinds of reading approach. This incidental reading is all around us. Learners learn to read signboards, labels in the classroom, words written on the board. Through incidental learning, learners are able to acquire vocabulary. We also have shared reading approach. The teacher reads with the whole class, the teacher reads aloud and the learners read the same. When selecting reading material, teacher should ensure that text is appropriate. We have group guided reading that usually begins in grade 2 and 3. Again, grade level readers are used. Before learners read the text, the teacher extends vocabulary from the text. These are some of the principles of group reading. Paired and independent reading. As learners gain competency to read, you can't just start with paired and independent reading and say these learners can read. You should have started somewhere for them to be able to be independent readers. So it is important that as learners gain competency to read, how do they gain the competency? In an additional language, teachers should give them opportunity to read in pairs or individually. This gives FAL learners the opportunity to practice the following: reading skills, reinforce their vocabulary, and develop fluency. Let's look at different kinds of reading activities in different grades. I might ask you a question. Describe how you will select text of varying levels in order to promote comprehension. Provide examples. Plan the lesson using the theme. Again, varying levels. These levels are very important. Drill the associated flashed words before reading the passage. The teacher read aloud and the learners repeat. So the levels must always vary. Your grade 1 level will differ with grade 3. Your grade 2 will vary with grade 3, those activities. Give learners simple activities or are practical to assess. See examples of reading activities for different grades. The preparation of writing is very important for foundation phase. According to DBA in FAL curriculum, writing is recommended for grade 2 and 3. Learners learn letter formation and handwriting skills in their home language. So in this one, it says, see examples of reading activities. You'll see them in page 61 to 62. Preparation for writing is very important. Now, before they can start writing, they know how to read. Hence, according to DBE, they can start writing those comprehensions and whatever from grade 2 to grade 3. But your text must vary from one grade to the other. Learners learn letter formation and handwriting skills in the home language. Preparatory stages of writing for recommended different grades is this one. In grade R and grade 1, fine motor skills activities will be done. Eye-hand coordination activities will be done. In grade 1, they'll be doing tracing and pattern work and letter formation again. But these are the levels of writing in grade 1, 2, and 3 of same grade R. They draw and label pictures. They write simple list of words. They put jumble words in the correct order. They write sentences. But these words, they can't write them if they can't read. And the words must also be of different levels. They must vary of different levels. You can't put simple sentences for grade 2, for grade 3s, which they should have been taught in grade 1 or grade 2. Write personal experiences using frameworks. Write story during shared reading. So these are the skills that you need, or the strategies that you need to take with you, and how to develop activities from one grade to the other. If you are teaching grade 2, you expect them to be able to read the words, and you can jumble the words and ask the learners to put them in the correct order or write them in the correct order. 4 types of writing. Note, writing activities are mainly guided as learners are learning a FAL. There is what we call shared writing that is done in grade 1, 2, and 3. Interactive writing that is done in grade 2 and 3. A guided writing in grade 2 and 3, and independent writing. See that in your study guide. Shared writing, teacher introduced the topic. Interactive occurs in smaller groups. Guided writing, learners are given a frame of reference or a clue or something to glue, given a sentence to complete. Independent writing, learners use their own ideas to write. Now, these are some of the activities that you can look at. Identify and list language skills according to the order which young children generally acquire a language skill. Describe and discuss how these language skills develop, the child's ability to acquire a second language effectively. What is the relationship between these language skills? Now you need to know what language skills are. Identify and list is a two-part question. Describe and discuss is a two-part question. What are the relationship between these language skills? You need to know those language skills, what they are, which is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Practice these questions. I have the responses for some of them. Identify and list language skills according to the order. It's listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Question 2, describe and discuss the two-part question. Listening and understanding the language. When it's spoken, you are describing. Speaking is fluently done. Read fluently. Write well enough to understand. So you are describing what they are, and then you can discuss them. Okay, question 3. What are the relationships when listening? When we listen to what people say and read what people write, we're receiving messages. When we speak to people and write to people, we produce messages. But you can write this in detail. A question might come and say, what are the relationships between these language skills? And it says 10 marks. Describe those language skills and tell us about the relationships. I mean, if I don't have good listening skills, when you speak, I won't understand what you say. So when you speak, let us need to develop those listening skills. But if they can't read, they won't be able to write. And if they can't speak that language, they won't even be able to read it. So it's very important for you to put it nicely in a paragraph. That there is a unit 3. Unit 3 I didn't touch much, but I'm much concerned with your key responsibility here as a teacher. Understand and interpreting second language policies for facilitation in the foundation phase. Outcomes: integrate FAL policies, apply language curriculum, contextual and adapt FAL teaching, cater for different contexts. You'll be able to do this after you have read and studied Unit 3. But my concentration is on lesson plan. Discuss what you understand about a lesson plan. Foundation phase has the responsibility of laying foundation for learners' academic careers. Do you see how important you are? So your lesson plan, when you say write a lesson plan, your lesson plan must be able to show us that you understand what teaching is all about. If you don't know what teaching is all about, it becomes a problem. So it's important for you to be able to understand what you are doing. Lesson plan from transmission of knowledge to learning opportunity. It says lesson plan must be a learning opportunity, not a transmission of knowledge. This implies learners take more active role in the learning process, and thus lesson planning needs to be focused on learner involvement. It says move away from teacher preparing note or writing, etc., to learners creating their own learning notes by participating, developing their own ideas. Remember when we started, we said interactive learning. There must be maximum interactive learning, maximum communication, maximum learner participation. That must show in the lesson plan. This is how a lesson plan will look like. The grade, because we want to see those different levels. The face, the date, the time, the topic. Please, your topic must not be the name of the book you are reading. The topic must be the language aspect that you are developing. Using listening skills to learn new vocabulary. Topic can be that. Even if I'm reading the book of The Lion and the Hare, or I'm reading any other book, the topic can be that book. That book is a frame of reference. But you are developing some skill here. Which skill are you developing? Resources will be that book, will be that chart, picture, flashcards, and whatever. Remember, this is a language module. Don't tell me that the topic will be understanding. If the theme is food, you'll be understanding healthy food. As they're learning about healthy food and food that is not good, what are you teaching them? What is the language aspect that you're teaching? It's vocabulary of words, such as. Then those words will be in your lesson plan. What are your assumptions? What knowledge do they have? This is grade 1. What are your assumptions? They may not be able or know the language, but my assumptions is that they have the home language. So I need to understand what is it that they have in home language as I prepare this. CAPS learning specific outcomes, you'll find them in your CAPS documents. Anticipated problems, remember abilities are not the same. You must remember that. Introduction, meet and greet the learners. Your introduction, you meet and you greet the learners. And you tell the learners what they will be learning. What is your frame of reference? Find out if any of them knows the new words they are going to learn. Because remember, you've put those words in different flashcards. And say, today we're going to learn about these words. But as we learn about these words, this is the story we're reading today. Or whatever you'll be doing on that day. Link to existing knowledge, relate to the new words. Relate new words to the words already learned. It's very important. Show how the new words link to the new words. Exposition and presentation. Reading, explain how. Reading skills of scanning, skimming. You know, if they're doing reading, tell us what is it that they'll be doing. They'll be scanning, they'll be skimming, or they will be doing critical responses. What will they be doing? What will the learners be doing? Remember how different skills are developed. Remember the different teaching strategies, methodologies, and approaches as you present. That I'll be using this approach as I'm going to do my presentation. As we read, we're going to do the decoding. So as they read the word, we'll look at this aspect and at these words when we decode. These are the skills that I'm going to teach them. These are the strategies I'm going to teach them as they do reading. Application, what are the learners going to do and how? So as you do that, what are the learners going to do? Remember, we said your lesson plan, learners need to be actively involved, not you only. We want to see that. Evaluation, the activity will show how much knowledge they have learned. So what are they going to do to show that they have learned something? Lastly, consolidation of the new content. The new knowledge can be consolidated by using new words together with the previously learned words in the new sentences or using them in a story. So you can even do that. Conclusion, you wrap up to say goodbye. Learners place their flashcards on a picture card on a wall next to the cards already displayed. Reflection and recommendation. Evaluate whether the new words were at the level of the learner's ability. So you can do it in different ways. You can come with a theme of food, and they can tell you any other words that they know about food, and you put down those labels. You can ask them to cut different kinds of food and say, you group, you do this kinds of food. These ones, they do these kinds of food. It's very important for you to do them. Okay, let's go to the last slide, which says, the last slide which says end of, it's not end of the year or the day, but it's end of Unit 1 and Unit 3. Unit 1, 2, and 3, and Unit 4, 5, 6 will come, and I'm going to prepare that for you. But remember, this video, after it has been edited, it will be sent to, uploaded to my UNISA. It's very important to always visit my UNISA as if you are interacting with a teacher. This says to you as a teacher, if you have knowledge, let others light their candle at it. Let these children reach their career path. Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. Are we failing them on life, or are we giving them life? Always remember that as a teacher. Many receive instructions, but only the wise learn from them or from it. So the instructions we've given you, learn from them, but do research again. You are third-year students, you are university students. Learn more about what we have given you in the study guide so that you go there empowered. All this that you are learning must be in your toolkit to go and teach those students, to go and teach those children. Those are your tools. Those are your tools. The strategies that you have learned are your tools to go and teach those children. I wish you all the best in this module, and I wish you all the best in your career. Goodbye for now. Thank you.